Hello, my name's Bill O'Toole and I'm an events development specialist, and I also work at a number of colleges and universities around the world, in particular the International College of Management in Sydney. My paper is called Developing the Events Sector Maturity Model, and I used action research methodology. So this presentation is going to be very much a visual summary with background overview of the paper. And the methodology took 20 years to go through. So we'll try to get through that in 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So that's a map of the whole project from beginning to end, and I'll go through each section as we go. But first, the methodology. The methodology was coming up with the hypothesis, which was that there is a maturity model that can be adapted across from engineering, medicine, and other professions into events, into event management, then into the event sector. And so for the next 20 years, I spent it exploring that. And this occurred in around about 20 countries, and basically was doing the following actions and then seeing what the result was, and then refining the model. And I'll show you the model at the end. And of course, it's in the paper as well. The first part of it, the first section here, the first 5 years or so, was spent on competency development. And by that, I meant I looked at event management. I'd been doing events for about 20 years prior to this, from festivals, concerts, occasional conference. And during that time, I realized that project management and risk management was missing in a lot of the textbooks. So I wrote a number of textbooks that included and put them up to be very important. The most important thing that happened then was getting together with a number of other people and forming the event management body of knowledge. This is courtesy of Janet Landy in South Africa. That went on to become an international competency standard that is used by the Canadian government and by MPI Web, Meetings Professional. And during that time, I wrote a number of books to catch the profession up on the theory of event management, project management, and risk management. The next part of the project was strategy development, looking at strategies. And so I worked in a number of countries developing government level or city level event strategies. Main one was Saudi Arabia, but also Dubai, Jordan, and quite a number of other cities around the world. Once again, each time refining the model. A good example of the interventions used in this methodology was the inaugural event conferences and forums that I either initiated, created, or certainly advised on. And these were in Sydney first off, and then places like Kenya, Saudi Arabia, Uganda, South Africa, Dubai, quite a few actually in Dubai and New Zealand, and a few other countries. So when you're developing strategies and in this intervention, what you need is a status report on the project. And fortunately in Saudi Arabia, we had a department to do that. And we developed a strategy and implemented it. So we needed to know the status and how it was going. And here's a good example of it, just a summary, obviously. We had to create new events, or we didn't, the local people did. And we had to enable those events, and these were the ways that we did it. And then we measured how well that worked. So that gets us to the actual maturity model itself, and basically a maturity model, which you can look it up when it comes to software and a variety of other things. Maturity model talks about phases over time. There's phase changes, and the end phase actually absorbs the preceding phase, needs that phase to get to where they are now. Okay, since earlier phases are vital in the study of the maturity model. The phases move through internal contradictions and catastrophic risks. There's two drivers. There's other ones down here. If you need to know more about that, there's a reference down the bottom which talks about crisis and events development, in particular about COVID. Um, so what a maturity model can be used for is by governments and cities to see where they are at in a maturity model and where they want to go, and therefore what gaps need to be closed and what's the optimal way of doing that, and not making the same mistakes that other countries have made, and they certainly have. So what does it look like? That's the result. It's a table in this form, and basically it says that there are 5 phases in the development of the events sector, which is sort of followed by events plus event companies. So they started off, and I'll use Australia as an example, but I could use Dubai or New Zealand or Uganda or any one of those countries. You start off with ad hoc, and this is a variety of event companies. Anyone can be an event company, basically, and run events at that stage. And the result is sort of an ecology, a competitive ecology of events. And the best ones win because they're the ones who attract people. And often these things are driven by a personality. And you still have this, even in advanced stages, even in advanced maturities, you still have a lot of this. Okay, the next phase that moves on because the government who hands out contracts for events and sponsors start wanting plans, like formal plans sent to them about the event, because they can't afford to have the thing to be a disaster when it happens. And so you start getting venues being built too. So the reason for this is the growth of events, basically, the growth of importance of events. From that, you get the government being more and more involved in the growth of the mega events around the world, and they're moving around the world. Concerts are moving around the world, conferences are moving around the world, and you're starting to demand integrated plans. And I could show you many requests for proposal from governments where they want the integrated plan, particularly risk management, which is one of the big drivers of this thing, by the way. Okay, so what happens at this stage is that because it's government, you want event strategies to be developed. And of course, this is where I came into a lot of countries to do exactly that. The government starts to subsidize these mega events, which take on a sort of world of their own, if you like, and major venues are being constructed. And you only have to look at Qatar or anywhere in the Gulf. Not only are they constructing major venues, they're constructing event cities in some of these countries, Saudi Arabia, etc. The next level, which is COVID, has driven us into this one around the world very quickly. Terrorism was one of the major drivers into this level 4, attacks on events, and this was mandatory standards. Codes, regulations start coming in, event-specific laws, as you know, in South Africa, they've had them, they have them, and you have the primacy of mega events then. And what happens, you get, for example, with security, you can have up to 30% of the budget spent on security, whereas in the ad hoc phase, the early phase, it was almost zero spent on security. So you've got these huge cost increase, which means the entry level for new and innovative events is just too high. And what you've got is a big internal contradiction. And this is the contradiction that I talk about in the article. The contradiction is that you can't renew the industry. Now, the industry is based on renewal, hence the word event, meaning something new. It's based on renewal. And once you get the mega events taking over, the major events taking over, the small events, it's just uneconomic. Now, this is a big problem. That's what we've got into now. And you're getting bureaucratization, which means that you're getting tick boxing and you can read it. And of course, it means that the industry becomes inflexible and open to disasters, big disasters that influence the whole of the industry, and COVID is a very good example of that. So what's the next phase? Well, if you look at Dubai and New Zealand and Edinburgh, for example, you can see that things are starting to move into their strategies, which talk about innovation and the creation of events, and looking at these codes and standards and how they can be scaled down for new events that are coming in that can't afford the huge amount of security and all the rest of it that's now mandatory for events. And this is the level where hopefully we will get to smaller events coming back and perhaps innovation. So that is the model. There's a lot more of it, obviously, in the paper. And if you need to know more, I should tell you the last paragraph, sorry. Just so that we get the conclusion. This is basically what I just said. Okay, it stifles diversity and agility and churn that's needed in an innovative sector. You've got to remember, events are disruptive in a lot of cases. That's the whole point of it. Okay, and it's these micro events, as I say down here, that build resilience, compete with each other and fail or succeed based on their ability to attract people, not through government subsidies, not through artificially keeping these things alive. These events grow and adapt along with their audience. Okay, so we're looking at longitudinally. They create the major events of the future. Just about all major events started off small. You've got to remember that. And getting a snapshot of mega events means that people are just focusing on that. And then you can look at any conference, particularly academic conferences, they focus on mega events. There's not a lot about weddings or distributed events or minor events. It's not a lot about street soccer, but there's a lot about the World Cup. And yet these things may have much bigger social and economic implications than mega events. Okay, so it's these events that give the life and breadth to the events sector. If you want to know more, you can have a look at the book that's coming out in a couple of weeks, where I go through each area, or similar to the MBOK, each of the areas of event management, and talk about how you can measure it against the maturity model. Okay, thanks for listening. And if you need to contact me, you're welcome to contact me. I'm at, you can see there. And if you've got any questions, welcome.